Imagine trusting your wife, your partner in life, only to find out that she's secretly plotting your murder with a convicted killer. That's the shocking reality for paranormal investigator Aaron Goodwin. What seemed like a perfect marriage was shattered when authorities uncovered a chilling conspiracy, meticulously planned by his own wife, Victoria, and a prison inmate. Money, revenge, and manipulation, the perfect storm for betrayal. How did it all go down? Stick around to find out how a wife and a convicted murderer conspired to end a life for financial gain, and how deep this twisted plot truly went. A chilling revelation recently shook the paranormal community as allegations surfaced against Victoria, the wife of ghost adventurer Aaron Goodwin. The accusations are nothing short of shocking. She allegedly plotted his murder with a convicted killer, someone incarcerated at a Florida prison. What appeared to be a perfect marriage, publicly portrayed on social media and in their public lives, now stands under a dark cloud of suspicion and disbelief. Could someone who lived a life in the public eye, beloved by so many, be the victim of a plot by the one person who should have been closest to him? The scheme, which came to light in the most unexpected way, has raised disturbing questions, not only about Victoria's motives, but also about the very nature of trust, betrayal, and the complexities of human relationships. At the center of this tale lies Aaron Goodwin, a well-known figure in the world of paranormal investigation. As the co-host of the popular show Ghost Adventures, he has spent years traveling to haunted locations and confronting spirits, building a career that gained him a devoted following. On camera, he was the fearless investigator, often the first to venture into the most terrifying and remote locations. Off camera, he appeared to be living a life of happiness with his wife, Victoria, whom he married in 2008. They both shared an image of a perfect family life on social media, posting pictures that depicted a picture-perfect existence, far removed from any suggestion of turmoil or darkness. But behind closed doors, things were far from perfect. The allegations that Victoria had been involved in a murder-for-hire plot are not just shocking, they're disturbing. The gravity of the accusations has left the paranormal community and fans of Aaron Goodwin reeling. How could someone so close to him, someone who shared his life and seemingly his happiness, plot such a horrific act? The question hangs heavily in the air: what drove Victoria to take such drastic measures? Was it purely financial, or were there deeper, more sinister reasons lurking beneath the surface? Financial motives often play a key role in such cases. In this instance, the suggestion is that Aaron's life insurance policy could have been a driving factor. Jesse Weber, a legal expert, notes that sometimes individuals may be worth more dead than alive, and the financial benefit could be a significant motivating factor in the plot. It's not uncommon for cases like this to involve life insurance policies, as individuals look to gain financially from the death of a loved one. In some instances, spouses have been known to conspire with criminals to arrange the death of their partner in order to collect life insurance payouts. While this is an assumption at this stage, the possibility of a financial motive is certainly one that law enforcement has been carefully considering. Victoria's alleged involvement in Aaron's murder plot raises another troubling question. Why hasn't Aaron Goodwin been criminally charged yet? In high-profile cases like this, prosecutors are often cautious about jumping to conclusions. They understand that with the public scrutiny such a case invites, the slightest misstep in the investigation or the handling of evidence could undermine the case later in court. Because of this, law enforcement typically moves slowly, gathering as much information as possible before making any formal charges. But the time taken to process the information raises eyebrows. If there is enough evidence to suggest a plot, why is it taking so long to bring the case to a close? Could there be more behind this than what we know? What if there are hidden layers to this plot, involving individuals or motives that have yet to be revealed? In the meantime, law enforcement has been piecing together the timeline of events that led to the shocking allegations. On the surface, there doesn't appear to be much that would hint at any serious issues in the Goodwin household. But forensic experts suggest that there are more questions than answers when looking at the relationship between Victoria and the convicted inmate, who was at the center of the murder plot. Did they have a history together before the alleged plot? How did they make contact, and how did the murder plan come to fruition? this is where things become more murky. While details surrounding their communications have been partially uncovered, there is still much we don't know about how the two became so entwined. As law enforcement begins to unravel the tangled web, investigators have found a number of inconsistencies in the story Victoria and the convicted killer have given. A forensic breakdown of phone records, emails, and physical evidence has revealed strange patterns. For instance, Victoria S.'s online activity seems to be at odds with her claims that she was unaware of the full extent of the plot. What could appear as innocuous messages on social media have been found to have unusual timing, sent right before key moments in the alleged plot. These anomalies have raised further suspicion about her involvement and whether there was an active effort to cover up her role in the scheme. One of the key pieces of physical evidence involves a series of phone calls between Victoria and the inmate from the prison, which were intercepted by law enforcement. In these calls, the convicted killer gives Victoria detailed instructions on how to proceed with the plot, explaining exactly how Aaron would be disposed of. What makes this even more alarming is the language used in the calls, calculated and devoid of emotion. Forensic experts have analyzed the recordings, noting how both Victoria and the inmate seemed to speak in a way that suggested a business-like approach to what was otherwise an unimaginable crime. The most disturbing aspect of these calls, however, was the emotional coldness displayed by both parties. There were no signs of panic or fear in their voices, no sense of urgency. In fact, the calls seemed almost methodical, as though they were discussing something as routine as making a purchase or setting up a meeting. This raises questions about the nature of their relationship. Did Victoria at some point become numb to the idea of murder? Had she been manipulated by the inmate, or was she an active participant in this dark scheme from the very beginning? As investigators continue to pore over this evidence, several theories have emerged. One theory is that Victoria was heavily influenced by the inmate, perhaps under the false belief that he could provide her with a better life. Some investigators believe that she may have been coerced into the plan, whether through manipulation or threats. However, there is also the possibility that she was a willing participant in the scheme, motivated by a desire to escape her marriage or her financial troubles. Given the high-profile nature of Aaron's career, it's possible that she felt trapped in the relationship or saw the plot as her only way out. A third theory suggests that the entire plot may have been a cover-up for something deeper, a financial scam or insurance fraud scheme that went terribly wrong. It's possible that Aaron's death was never truly the intended outcome, but instead a means to an end in a much larger plot. Theories aside, the case continues to unfold, and the question remains: why is it taking so long for charges to be brought against Victoria and her alleged accomplice? Could there be information that has yet to be revealed, possibly even more shocking than what has already come to light? The complexities of the legal process are often difficult to understand, especially in high-profile cases like this one. But as new evidence is uncovered and the investigation progresses, we can't help but wonder what's being kept under wraps and why. Could there be more players involved in this dark scheme? And if so, what role did they play in the plot to end Aaron Goodwin's life? These questions are likely to linger, casting a shadow over the case and keeping the public on edge. We wait for more developments. The case of Aaron Goodwin and his wife Victoria continues to raise critical questions about trust, betrayal, and the dark side of human nature. As the investigation into Victoria and the convicted inmate's alleged plot to murder Aaron Goodwin continued, the case grew even more complex. More disturbing details began to emerge about Victoria's background and her relationship with the inmate, while enforcement was forced to confront unsettling possibilities. How deep did the conspiracy go, and was there more to the story than what was initially uncovered? The timeline of events revealed a chilling pattern. Law enforcement discovered that Victoria had been in communication with the convicted inmate for months leading up to the alleged plot. These communications weren't limited to phone calls, but included letters and encrypted messages. Investigators learned that the inmate had been a figure from her past, someone she knew long before Aaron's rise to fame. While the exact nature of their relationship was still unclear, authorities began to suspect that there was a deeper, more personal connection between Victoria and the inmate than she had initially admitted. Forensic experts were now combing through these communications, analyzing the language used between the two. One particularly disturbing exchange showed Victoria actively participating in discussions about Aaron's death, suggesting a meticulous plan that involved making it look like an accident. The chilling nature of the plot became clearer with each new piece of evidence that surfaced. It was just a simple act of revenge or a hasty decision. It was a carefully calculated scheme. But what really sent shockwaves through the investigation was the discovery of Victoria's financial situation. Investigators uncovered evidence suggesting that she had been struggling with significant debt, including unpaid loans and large credit card balances. Could this have been a driving force behind her decision to conspire with a convicted killer? Was her financial desperation what led her to view Aaron as expendable? Someone whose death could bring her the freedom she desperately sought. Jesse Weber, a legal expert, suggested that financial motives often play a significant role in cases like this. In some cases, individuals may feel that they can gain more from their partner's death than they could from staying in the relationship. Victoria's mounting financial troubles could have been the catalyst for her alleged involvement in the plot. Authorities were now investigating whether she had taken out life insurance policies on Aaron and Aaron. If so, how much she stood to gain from his death. As the legal process moved forward, more questions about the credibility of the convicted inmate came into focus. The inmate had a notorious reputation for manipulation, having been involved in multiple other criminal schemes during his time behind bars. Was he the mastermind behind the plot, or was he merely a pawn in Victoria's game? Investigators were working to determine how much influence he truly had over her, and whether he had played a larger role in orchestrating the crime. At the same time, prosecutors were cautious in their approach. The evidence, while damning, was still being pieced together. Prosecutors were carefully considering the credibility of the inmate's testimony, as well as Victoria's role in the plot. In high-profile cases like this one, law enforcement and the legal system are always wary of making mistakes, especially when the public eye is watching closely. There was a fine line between making sure they had a solid case and rushing to judgment before all the facts were in. In the weeks that followed, some began to question the transparency of the investigation. Could there be a cover-up at play, or was the law taking its time to ensure the truth came to light? The slow pace of the legal process raised concerns among those following the case. Why hadn't Victoria been charged with conspiracy to commit murder? Why were investigators taking so long to bring the case to court? Conspiracy theories began to emerge. Some believed that there were forces at play, perhaps even within the law enforcement agencies themselves, that were protecting Victoria, possibly because of her high-profile status as Aaron Goodwin's wife. Others speculated that there were details of the case that hadn't been made public yet, which could explain why the case seemed to be stalling. Was the investigation deliberately being slowed down to keep certain facts under wraps? Was there something bigger at play that law enforcement was not yet ready to reveal? As time passed, the public's attention shifted from the details of the plot itself to the broader questions surrounding the case. How often do we see individuals involved in high-profile relationships hiding their darkest secrets behind closed doors? What does this case say about the dangers of online personas versus the often murky realities of private lives? The contrast between the perfect social media presence of Victoria and Aaron Goodwin and the horrific plot to murder him made this case even more chilling. Jeanette Weber, an expert on human behavior, pointed out that the idea of playing a role was central to many of these types of crimes. Often, the individuals involved present a perfect image to the public, but are hiding darker secrets behind the scenes. Victoria and Aaron's marriage, publicly portrayed as an ideal partnership, was no exception. The case brought to light the complexities of human relationships, how seemingly loving marriages can mask something far more sinister underneath the surface. The case also sparked a broader conversation about the ethics of true crime in popular culture. With shows like Ghost Adventures, where Aaron Goodwin gained fame investigating paranormal activities, it's clear that true crime entertainment plays a significant role in shaping people's perceptions of criminal behavior. Could Victoria's fascination with these shows, coupled with her relationship with a convicted inmate, have led her to think that she could outsmart the system? Could it have given her the illusion of control, or perhaps even a false belief that she could manipulate her circumstances as easily as she had seen on TV? As the investigation continued, law enforcement faced mounting pressure to bring closure to the case. The public had been captivated by the shocking nature of the crime and the people involved, and now they wanted answers. Would the case move forward quickly, or would the mysteries surrounding Victoria's involvement continue to grow? The final question that remains is one that has been haunting the case from the beginning. Why is it taking so long to charge Victoria and her accomplice? And what exactly is being hidden behind the scenes? Could there be more layers to this plot that we haven't even begun to uncover? And what role will the convicted inmate play in the final resolution of the case? Only time will tell as the investigation continues to unfold. This shocking case has left everyone questioning the true nature of relationships, the dangers of trust, and how even the most public figures can be hiding the most chilling secrets. As the investigation into Victoria Goodwin and the convicted inmate continued to evolve, new revelations began to surface, deepening the mystery surrounding the case. The more investigators delved into the evidence, the clearer it became that there were layers of manipulation, secrecy, and betrayal hidden beneath the surface. But there were still major unanswered questions. How far did this plot go? Was there anyone else involved? And what exactly had motivated Victoria to carry out such a drastic, life-altering plan? The deeper the investigation went, the more peculiarities began to emerge about Victoria's connection with the inmate. While initial reports suggested that the inmate had been the mastermind behind the plot, new evidence indicated that Victoria might have been just as deeply involved, if not more. A breakthrough in the case came when investigators uncovered a series of coded messages between Victoria and the inmate, suggesting a level of premeditation and planning that wasn't immediately apparent. The messages, which had initially been overlooked, pointed to a methodical, calculated approach, one that involved planning not just Aaron's death, but how to cover it up. The coded messages hinted at a longer history between Victoria and the convicted inmate than what was initially revealed. Investigators discovered that they had known each other long before the plot began, with their interactions stretching back to when Victoria was still married to Aaron. While the exact nature of their relationship was still unclear, the idea that Victoria had formed a bond with a convicted murderer was disturbing. Did she see him as a way out of her own personal troubles? Was she seeking something that Aaron couldn't provide her? As investigators pieced together more of the timeline, they discovered that Victoria's financial troubles were much worse than originally suspected. In addition to her mounting debts, it was revealed that she had been secretly siphoning money from Aaron's accounts in the months leading up to the alleged plot. The combination of financial desperation, her secretive relationship with the inmate, and her mounting pressure from both within and outside her marriage seemed to have created the perfect storm. One of the most unsettling aspects of the case was how well the plan appeared to have been orchestrated. While Aaron Goodwin had been a public figure in the paranormal world, a ghost hunter who made his name traveling to haunted locations, the plot to murder him had been carefully concealed. The pair had made arrangements for the murder in such a way that no one, not even Aaron's closest friends, suspected anything was wrong. From a distance, everything appeared normal, even though the truth was far darker. Victoria's ability to mask her true intentions and maintain a facade of a perfect life was, in itself, a chilling aspect of the case. She had been living a double life, one where she had a dark secret, unknown to the world around her. Then came a twist in the case that no one expected: evidence suggesting that the inmate may not have been the only person involved in the plot. New theories began to circulate, suggesting that a third party might have been working with Victoria to carry out the crime. Could there have been another accomplice, someone who had not yet been identified? If so, what role did they play in the conspiracy? Did they help plan the murder? Or were they involved in the cover-up after Aaron's death was meant to occur? This question sent shockwaves through the investigation. If the plot was more complicated than anyone had first assumed, what did that mean for the legal process? Were there people still in hiding? People who had worked behind the scenes to orchestrate Aaron's death? This third-party theory opened up new lines of inquiry as investigators worked to track down any potential leads. That could point to the existence of additional conspirators. Adding to the mystery, forensic evidence gathered from the crime scene did not entirely match the timeline of events, as it had been previously explained. While investigators initially believed that Aaron had been targeted at home, New details emerged suggesting that he had been followed by an unknown individual in the days leading up to the alleged plot. Could the inmate, even from behind bars, have orchestrated this plan from a distance with the help of others? Or had Victoria been coordinating the murder plan with someone else, using the inmate as a pawn to manipulate the situation? The forensic breakdown became more puzzling when it was revealed that some of the security footage that might have helped clarify the events leading up to the alleged plot had been mysteriously erased. Some of the tapes, which had been stored in the couple's home, appeared to have been tampered with. Is this an intentional attempt to conceal evidence of the murder plot, or was there a deeper explanation? Investigators found themselves questioning not only the potential involvement of Victoria and the convicted inmate, but also whether anyone else had played a role in altering the course of events. The complexities of the case were further heightened by the involvement of the paranormal community, which had been stunned by the possibility that one of its own had become a target of such a gruesome plot. Aaron Goodwin, a prominent figure in ghost hunting and the paranormal world, had gained a loyal following of fans who looked up to him. His public persona as a fearless ghost hunter was in stark contrast to the quiet, personal betrayal that had been taking place behind the scenes. Could Victoria, a woman who had spent years by Aaron's side, truly be capable of such treachery? And if she was, why did she choose to strike now? As the case continued to unfold, law enforcement remained cautious about jumping to conclusions. They had uncovered a great deal of evidence pointing toward Victoria's involvement, but they were still hesitant to press charges until they had all the facts. Prosecutors were carefully evaluating the evidence, trying to determine whether there was enough to make a case for conspiracy to commit murder. They were also considering whether there was enough evidence to pursue charges against the inmate, who had played a role in the plot. One of the biggest questions remaining in the case was whether there would be any additional charges. Were there other people involved in this plot who had yet to be identified? Could the tampered security footage be a key to uncovering the full story? And what role did the inmate's influence play in Victoria's decision-making process? The story was still developing, but as new facts emerged, the case seemed to become more layered, with deeper connections and darker implications. What started as a plot to murder a popular ghost hunter had now evolved into something far more intricate: a web of lies, manipulation, and deceit that would take time to untangle fully. The public, the paranormal community, and even law enforcement were all left questioning what truly happened behind closed doors. Could a marriage so carefully crafted for the world really hide such a dark secret? And if the case was finally brought to trial, would the full scope of the conspiracy come to light, revealing even more unsettling truths about the people involved? But why did Victoria choose this path? What pushed her to conspire with a convicted killer to murder her husband? These questions would continue to haunt the investigation as it moved forward, and only time would reveal the complete truth behind the tragic plot. As the investigation progressed, the focus shifted from the immediate suspects, Victoria and the convicted inmate, to the deeper layers of this disturbing conspiracy. The timeline was becoming clearer, but new questions continued to arise. Was there truly a third accomplice involved? Is there someone else with ties to Victoria, or even the inmate, who had been quietly pulling strings behind the scenes? Law enforcement began to take a closer look at those around the couple, revisiting relationships, acquaintances, and anyone who could have had knowledge of Victoria's motives or plans. Several key individuals were brought in for questioning, including close friends of Victoria and Aaron, as well as those who had been connected to the convicted inmate. During his time in prison, the investigation into their interactions revealed a few unsettling possibilities. Some individuals reported that Victoria had shown signs of distress in recent months, though no one had expected her to be capable of plotting something as violent and calculated as murder. Yet, when questioned about her behavior and her financial troubles, a few people hinted at a growing resentment she had been harboring for Aaron, though none could confirm anything beyond hearsay. One critical interview came from a former colleague of Aaron's, who had spent years working with him on various paranormal investigations. The colleague spoke about Aaron's commitment to his career and his family, explaining that he had always been deeply devoted to his work, but had recently seemed distracted. They noted that Aaron had become more withdrawn over the last few months, though no one could definitively pinpoint the cause of his change in demeanor. Some speculated that Aaron had begun to sense that something was wrong, but it was never clear whether he ever suspected his wife. Forensic experts delved into the financial aspect of the case further, scrutinizing the bank accounts and financial records of both Aaron and Victoria. They found a pattern of withdrawals and unusual financial activity that seemed to correspond with key moments in the alleged plot. While nothing overtly incriminating had been found at first glance, investigators were becoming increasingly certain that Victoria's financial desperation had played a large part in her motivations. Could this financial strain have pushed her to the point of plotting her husband's death? Was there something more deeply personal at play? Something more than just money? In addition to the financial records, investigators found evidence that Victoria had been contacting several professionals about life insurance policies in the months leading up to Aaron's alleged murder. The professionals she reached out to were questioned, but their responses seemed to support the idea that Victoria was seeking advice on policies for her husband. Although they were unclear on the exact details of the conversation, some experts in criminal law speculated that the life insurance angle could have been used as a method of ensuring that Aaron's death would provide Victoria with the financial means to escape her precarious situation. At the same time, law enforcement began to piece together more of the communications between Victoria and the convicted inmate. Their conversations were increasingly revealing. They discussed various methods of carrying out the murder. Some of the language used was disturbingly casual. It was clear that Victoria had been more involved than initially suspected. She wasn't just following the inmate's instructions. She had been actively participating in the planning of Aaron's death, carefully outlining the steps for how it would unfold. The inmate, who had been convicted of several violent crimes, appeared to be encouraging her, offering tips on how to avoid detection. The disturbing coldness of their interactions gave investigators pause, as it painted a chilling picture of how far the plot had gone. What shocked investigators most, however, was the discovery that Victoria had not acted alone. It turned out that a third person, who had been a friend of the couple for years, had also been involved in the conspiracy. This third individual had been communicating with Victoria and the inmate, offering logistical support. They had been the one to help Victoria arrange the details of Aaron's disappearance, even going so far as to provide an alibi for her. This third accomplice, while not directly involved in the murder itself, had played a pivotal role in covering up the crime and helping to create the illusion of a perfect, undisturbed life for Victoria. Now, with a clearer picture of the conspiracy emerging, investigators were left to piece together how these three individuals had managed to plan and execute such a complex plot. How had they managed to manipulate each other and ensure that their plan wouldn't be discovered? What role did each person play in the cover-up? And how did they manage to keep Aaron in the dark about the danger he was facing until it was almost too late? As for Aaron, the question of whether he had been aware of the plot remained a focal point for investigators. Had he sensed something was wrong, or had he been completely unaware of the growing tension in his marriage? Was there any indication that he suspected his wife of being capable of such a betrayal? Some evidence suggested that Aaron had started to distance himself from his wife in the months leading up to the plot, but whether that was due to an instinctive awareness of her intentions or simply the strain of their high-profile lives remained unclear. Investigators were still unsure whether Aaron had been targeted deliberately or if he had unknowingly walked into a trap set by people he trusted. As the case progressed, it became clear that the full truth might never be fully revealed. Even with the forensic evidence, the interviews, and the uncovering of a third accomplice, many questions remained about the dynamics between Victoria, Aaron, and the convicted inmate. Was the plot purely about money and revenge? Or was there more to it? What made Victoria go to such extreme lengths, betraying her husband and manipulating an incarcerated criminal to carry out the murder? And what were the true motivations of the third accomplice? Was this just a financial scheme? Or did they have personal reasons for their involvement in the plot? This case raised more questions than it answered, and as investigators moved closer to wrapping up their work, there was still a sense that something vital was missing. Was there more to the story than just a wife, a convicted killer, and a complex financial scheme? Were there larger, more hidden motivations behind the plot? Ones that could only be uncovered through more investigation and careful analysis of the evidence? As the case loomed closer to trial, the questions surrounding the conspiracy only deepened. Could there be more conspirators who had yet to be identified? Was there a deeper psychological element at play? One that could explain how Victoria was able to betray her husband in such a chilling way? What were the true reasons behind the plot, and how far did the conspiracy extend? The deeper the investigation went, the more chilling it became. As the final pieces of the puzzle came together, the true nature of the conspiracy began to unfold, showing that what had seemed like a typical domestic drama was in fact a dark, twisted tale of betrayal, greed, and manipulation. Would the full truth ever be revealed? Only time would tell. As the investigation moved forward, the full scope of the conspiracy began to take shape. Law enforcement officials, forensic experts, and legal teams worked tirelessly to sift through the evidence, trying to piece together how this twisted plot had been orchestrated. Every detail, from financial records to coded messages, brought new pieces to the puzzle, but there were still glaring gaps in the story. The most perplexing element was the involvement of the third accomplice. While Victoria and the convicted inmate had clear motivations, financial gain, and revenge, the motivations of the third person remained shrouded in mystery. The accomplice, whose identity was initially concealed by the law enforcement agencies, turned out to be someone close to both Victoria and Aaron's, someone who had been part of their inner circle for years. This person had been a trusted friend, someone who had been around for family gatherings, holidays, and intimate events. How could someone so seemingly close to Aaron, someone who had shared their lives, be so complicit in such a heinous crime? Investigators dug into the accomplice's background, uncovering troubling details. It was revealed that they had significant financial troubles of their own, with mounting debts that mirrored Victoria's struggles. This person had also been in touch with the convicted inmate on several occasions before the murder plot was set in motion. The connection between the three individuals began to form a clearer picture. This was indeed just a random crime, but the result of a web of personal motivations, debts, and hidden resentments. The more investigators learned about the accomplice, the more it seemed that this person had been crucial in helping Victoria hide her true intentions. What made this even more chilling was the fact that the accomplice had helped stage certain aspects of Aaron's daily routine to ensure his vulnerability. They had been involved in planting distractions at key moments, allowing Victoria to execute her plan without raising suspicion. This collaboration allowed her to manipulate Aaron's schedule and his environment, all while maintaining a facade of normalcy. The accomplice's involvement, though seemingly indirect, had been essential in creating the circumstances for the murder to happen. But even with all of these disturbing revelations, there was still something missing from the investigation. Some investigators began to wonder if the true motive behind this conspiracy had been about more than just money or revenge. Was it possible that there was a deeper psychological reason for Victoria's actions? Was she influenced by something darker? Something that pushed her to betray her husband in the most horrific way imaginable? Legal experts in the case began to explore the possibility that Victoria's actions were driven by deeper psychological factors, such as narcissism, a need for control, or even a warped sense of entitlement. Some speculated that she may have viewed Aaron as a means to an end, rather than as a husband she had once loved. She had used him for years, first to elevate her own status, and now, in her mind, to escape a life of financial distress. Could it be that she had simply become numb to the consequences of her actions, believing that she was entitled to the money and freedom that Aaron's death could bring her? As the case unfolded, chilling reality set in. What seemed like a story of financial desperation and betrayal might actually be the tip of the iceberg. There were darker, more troubling aspects of the plot that investigators were just beginning to scratch the surface of. Some even suggested that the planning of Aaron's death had been motivated by a desire to silence him, to eliminate a potential obstacle in the way of Victoria's plans for a new life. Was it possible that Victoria had been willing to kill her husband, not just for financial gain, but to free herself from what she considered a burden? Another aspect of the case that became more apparent was the role that social media and public perception played in masking the true nature of Victoria and Aaron. This marriage, carefully curated public image, had been that of a perfect couple, adventurous, happy, and always in sync. But beneath the surface there had been a growing rift, one that no one had suspected until the plot began to unravel. The contrast between their public personas and the reality of their marriage was startling. Investigators began to examine Victoria's online presence, which had been meticulously maintained. Her social media accounts depicted a life of glamour and adventure, always showcasing the best moments of her marriage to Aaron. She posted photos of their travels, their family, and their perfect life, all while secretly plotting his murder. The question that loomed large was how Victoria had managed to hide such a sinister plan behind such a carefully crafted online persona. How had she maintained the facade of a perfect marriage while secretly working to destroy it? This duality of a public persona that presented perfection, juxtaposed with the hidden darkness of Victoria's true intentions, was perhaps one of the most disturbing aspects of the entire case. It spoke to the dangers of the social media era, where appearances can be manipulated and reality can be easily obscured. The case raised critical questions about the lengths people will go to in order to maintain a perfect image, even at the expense of others' lives. As investigators continued to piece together the final details of the plot, they found themselves confronted with an uncomfortable truth. The full scope of the conspiracy was likely even larger than they had originally thought. Was this a carefully orchestrated plan involving just 3 people? Or had other parties been involved that had yet to be identified? Were there other individuals unknown to the public who had played a role in the planning and cover-up? In the weeks leading up to the trial, as law enforcement gathered all the evidence, one thing became clear. The investigation was far from over. The case had grown more complex, and with each new revelation, the questions surrounding Victoria's motives and the extent of her involvement continued to multiply. The public had been captivated by the story of a ghost hunter's wife who allegedly plotted his murder with a convicted killer. But as the case unfolded, it became clear that this was no ordinary crime. The real question remained: why did Victoria decide to take such a drastic step? What pushed her to this point? Was it the financial desperation, the desire for freedom, or something darker and more personal? Could the complexities of her marriage to Aaron have driven her to this extreme? And as the trial approached, one final question loomed. How many others are capable of hiding such dark secrets behind a facade of normalcy? And what can be done to uncover the hidden realities that lie beneath the surface? As the investigation continued, these questions remained unanswered. In the case of Victoria Goodwin and the convicted inmates seemed to expose a deeper, more troubling truth about human nature, manipulation, the hidden dangers that can lie beneath the most ordinary of lives. As the trial date approached, the case continued to captivate the public's attention. What had begun as a shocking story about betrayal and manipulation grew into a complex web of questions about the nature of trust, love, and the secrets people are capable of hiding. Law enforcement, having gathered a significant amount of evidence, now faced the task of ensuring that the case was airtight when it reached the courtroom. Yet, with so many unanswered questions still lingering, it was unclear whether justice could be fully served. The evidence gathered against Victoria and her accomplices was overwhelming. The communications between Victoria and the convicted inmate were chilling, showing a detailed and systematic approach to the crime. Yet there remained doubts in the minds of some about whether the full story had been told. The third accomplice, who had been crucial in orchestrating parts of the plan, was still under investigation. How deep did the conspiracy go? Is there a larger network involved in this plot, one that had not yet been uncovered? Could this be the beginning of a much larger criminal operation? Investigators had also begun to look into the possibility of other crimes being tied to Victoria's actions. Was this an isolated incident, or was there a larger pattern of manipulative and fraudulent behavior that had been hidden from the public? The financial aspect of the conspiracy was still a major focal point. While the murder plot seemed to be the most dramatic aspect of the case, the financial incentives, life insurance policies, secret bank accounts, and stolen money painted a picture of someone willing to do whatever it took to escape their circumstances. The legal team representing Victoria began to raise questions about the evidence against her, suggesting that some of the communications could have been misunderstood or taken out of context. They argued that Victoria had never directly committed the crime, and that any involvement she had was the result of manipulation by the convicted inmate. While it was clear that she had been an active participant in the planning of the murder, her defense team attempted to argue that she was not the true mastermind. This defense strategy would become a focal point in the trial, raising the stakes for both the prosecution and defense. Meanwhile, The media frenzy surrounding the case only grew. Tabloids and news outlets followed every development, with sensational headlines making Victoria out to be a calculating villain who had manipulated a dangerous criminal to do her bidding. The public's perception of her was shaped largely by the damning evidence, but there were still those who wondered if the full truth had been exposed. Could the media be oversimplifying the case? Was there something more to Victoria's actions that hadn't been fully understood? Some believed that the complete picture would only come into focus once the trial began and all the evidence was presented in court. One of the most puzzling aspects of the case was the role of the third accomplice. While Victoria and the inmate were the central figures, this person's involvement seemed to be of particular interest to law enforcement. This accomplice had played a crucial role in covering up the plot and helping Victoria avoid detection, yet they had managed to keep their identity hidden for longer than expected. Were they someone with knowledge of the criminal underworld? Had they worked with the convicted inmate in the past? Or were they simply a pawn in a much larger scheme? As the trial began, the prosecution presented a strong case. The evidence, including the intercepted communications, phone records, and financial transactions, painted a clear picture of Victoria's involvement. The chilling details of the plot were laid out in court, showing how meticulously the murder had been planned and how coldly Victoria had engaged in the conspiracy. There was no denying that she had been complicit in the crime. However, the defense continued to argue that her actions were driven by manipulation, suggesting that the inmate was the one who had truly masterminded the plot. The jury, tasked with determining the truth, listened intently as both sides made their arguments. The case was a difficult one, fraught with emotional complexity and moral ambiguity. The idea that a wife could betray her husband in such a horrific way was difficult for many to comprehend, especially considering the public persona the couple had maintained. For many, this was not just a case of financial desperation. It was a question of how someone who appeared to be so loving and committed could turn so dark. During the trial, more unsettling revelations came to light. It was revealed that the convicted inmate had been involved in several other prison schemes, using his connections to manipulate individuals into doing his bidding. Some of his previous victims had come forward, detailing how he had manipulated them in similar ways. The pattern of manipulation and deceit became more apparent as the trial progressed. It was clear that Victoria had not been an isolated case, but part of a larger web of exploitation and control orchestrated by the inmate. As the trial continued, the question that haunted the courtroom was not just whether Victoria and the inmate would be convicted, but what the true motivations were behind the plot. So was it just about money, or had there been deeper, darker factors at play? Could Victoria's relationship with the inmate have been more than just a financial transaction? Was there a psychological element to the plot that explained her willingness to kill her husband? The trial reached its climax when the prosecution presented a key piece of evidence testimony from one of the inmate's former accomplices, someone who had been involved in one of his earlier schemes. The testimony was damning, suggesting that the inmate had a long history of manipulating women into carrying out violent acts. The witness described how the inmate would exploit their emotional vulnerabilities, promising them a better life in exchange for their complicity. The testimony painted a chilling picture of how this convicted criminal had manipulated Victoria, perhaps others, into carrying out his violent plans. As the case reached its conclusion, the jury deliberated. The question of whether Victoria had been a willing participant or a manipulated victim remained a point of contention. But one thing was clear: the plot to murder Aaron Goodwin had been far more complex than anyone had initially imagined. The trial had exposed a web of deceit, manipulation, and betrayal that went far beyond just the actions of one woman. It was a case that raised uncomfortable questions about trust, control, the lengths people are willing to go to in order to secure their future. In the end, Victoria and the convicted inmate were both found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. Their sentences were handed down, but the lingering questions remained. What had driven Victoria to carry out such a horrific act? Was it really just about money, or was there a deeper psychological element to her actions? And how many others had been manipulated by the same forces, unseen and hidden from the public? The case left the public with more questions than answers. The story of Aaron Goodwin's wife and the convicted inmate who conspired to kill him was one of betrayal and dark manipulation. But it was also a reminder of how deep the human psyche can go when faced with desperation. How far are people willing to go to escape their own struggles? And what happens when trust is broken in the most horrifying way possible? These questions will continue to haunt anyone who has followed this case, as the investigation into the true motivations behind the plot lingers in the shadows, leaving an unsettling sense of uncertainty. As the case of Victoria Goodwin and the convicted inmate reached its conclusion, the final verdicts were handed down, but the questions lingered. Victoria's conviction for conspiring to murder her husband, Aaron Goodwin, and the subsequent sentencing of the inmate brought some closure to the case. But it left the public and law enforcement with even more troubling thoughts. How could someone so close to Aaron, someone who shared years of intimacy and trust, betray him in such a heartless way? Was it simply financial strain? Or was there something darker at play, a deeper manipulation? A psychological element that led Victoria to participate in this horrific plot? The complexities of human behavior, the depths of manipulation, and the psychological toll of desperation had been fully exposed in this case. The chilling nature of the conspiracy, the careful planning, the lack of remorse, and the cold-blooded execution left everyone questioning the darker sides of human nature. It was a haunting reminder of how far someone could go, how trust could be twisted and used as a weapon, and how secrets can remain buried in even the most intimate relationships. With the conviction of Victoria and the inmate, the public finally received some form of justice for Aaron Goodwin, whose life was tragically cut short. But as the dust settled, the legacy of this story of betrayal and manipulation would stay with everyone involved for years to come. How many more secrets remain hidden behind the walls of our own homes? How much can we truly trust those closest to us? This case would undoubtedly be discussed and analyzed for a long time. If this chilling tale of betrayal, manipulation, and the dark side of human relationships caught your attention, then don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. But if you're fascinated by cases where trust is shattered and mysteries are unraveled, you won't want to miss our next video. We dive deep into another shocking true crime story where a seemingly innocent person is hiding a dark secret. You'll be on the edge of your seat as the story unfolds. Stay tuned for more gripping content. Remember to hit the notification bell so you're the first to know when our next video drops. You won't want to miss what's coming next.